Hi, this is Elaine Benfield, and welcome to a special edition of Herstories. I'm super excited to have Sherean Malekzadeh on the line. Did I do it right? Did I do?
Perfect. Perfect.
So, some of you might know that I've had Sherean on before. She is one of the smartest women I know. She's in marketing, has her own agency, but we relate to another level because of our proud ancestry, who we are, how we got here. And that is something we've talked about a long time. So I invited, and Sherean and I have been talking about, we really want to talk about the war in Iran, talk about Iran as a country, a culture, a civilization, incredible people. Sherean is half Iranian. And so I want to go through and you're going to hear me make mistakes. I'm learning. I know so high level about the culture, but this is something for everyone to listen. This is super passionate for both of us. We um, we want to talk about the bigger issue of the war, but also the culture and what's going on behind the scenes. Shrina's family in Iran now. And so this is going to be emotional, and I think it's important for everyone to listen to. So, Sherean, it's such a pleasure to have you, and thank you so much for joining her
Oh,
stories.
merci, as we would say in Farsi. Merci, which is thank you.
So, welcome, and so you and I. So, tell us a little bit of your background, who you are, and your parents, and let's talk and start off, and then we have a lot of topics to talk
Sure.
about.
Well, my dad was born in Iran. He came to the States when he was a teenager. First, he accompanied his older sister when she went to college in DC, but then he went to college in Kentucky, which is where he met my mom. So my mom is from West Virginia, Appalachian country. Her father at one point was a coal miner. My grandfather on my dad's side was the president of the oil company in a town called Mashhad in Iran. So I think it's really funny to have that on both sides. Um, I was born in Kentucky and we moved to Iran when I was 10. I lived there from ages 10 to 13 in Tehran, the main city. So I think, a lot of us, you'll hear a lot of people identify as Iranian American. I've never said that. I've always just said that I was half Iranian. So I'm a half C, like you're a half
Yeah.
German, half C's. But for a lot of folks who are second generation here, they've never actually lived in the country, but I have. I say I've walked the streets of the bazaar. I've dipped my toes in the Caspian Sea. We would vacation there.
How
I've
long
been
did you live
inside
there
a
for?
mosque. Hmm?
How long did you live there for?
3 years. Yeah, we came back right before the revolution, 78.
So, and your parents were both, and your father's, still active in your life. You were always proud of your heritage. It's something that you and I have talked about, and I'm so proud of who I am. You and I talked about you were born here, but you really relate to the culture of your dad's side. You're really close with him, and he's really instrumental in your son's life and your family life. And
Sure. Yes.
talk to me about what you remember from that time of being there for those ages.
I remember my,
So you mentioned like being in mosques and there's
yeah.
certain things that were so iconic for you. What do you remember about that?
And I mean, I really remember getting to know my Iranian family, right? I had met many of them had come to the States for school and had stayed with us. So I had met many of my aunts and uncles. But being in Iran at that time, I got to know my cousins, all my first cousins. I'm still very close with them. I did not know the language when I went there. I'd heard it in my home when people would come visit. And so I think I have a decent accent when I speak Persian, and I think it's because I'd heard it. It was like stuck in my brain, but I didn't actually speak it until we lived there. I took some classes. So the things I mostly remember are the kindness of the people. They would never let me practice my Persian. They would say, "No, no, let me speak English, English." They loved to squeeze cheeks, and I hated that. But I remember the kindness of my grandparents, Jadejan and Baba Bazurk, and how she would make me oatmeal whenever we would visit because it was a thing that I liked that was not a regular breakfast there. And I wanted, to my shame, I wanted American toast instead of the beautiful, amazing breads they had. So they would find some, and my grandfather would toast it on a Bunsen burner, one slice at a time, while she was making this beautiful oatmeal for me. And so I mostly just remember the family. So we spent a lot of time with family. I went to an American school, but certainly got dipped in and experienced the culture.
Yeah, nothing
Yes.
better than being present in that. And it was something, you and I before we joined, I was telling you that my father, both my parents, because my mom was from Germany, my father was American, but he really loved culture and he really absorbed and wanted to understand. And I really do want to get into some of the history. And it was something I told you that my father was an avid art collector. One of the things he did was he collected, when I was a child, Persian rugs.
Oh, how
It
amazing.
it was his prized possession. You walked in my childhood home everywhere, on the walls, on the floor. He just and they all didn't match, but they were all so beautiful and unique. And it just, because they're all different patterns, and it's just
Yes.
all my friends remember my childhood, and he was so proud to show you that because he respected, how, people can work with their hands and how do you build something so beautiful. And so to me, I grew up with such a fascination of the world, but that was a part of the region that my father
Beautiful.
was uniquely interested in. Especially as an American, that's not as
Yeah, that's
typical.
so different.
So
My
different.
we definitely my family had a Persian carpet factory back in the day. My great-great-grandfather.
Could you imagine if that one of the rugs, we have to compare because could you even imagine? We have some of the records of where
There.
we got it. Could you imagine? That would be wild. We'll have to look into it.
We have you were talking about the beautiful patterns. I just wanted to say they weave in imperfections. They can't be perfect because they believe that only God is perfect.
Yep.
So all Persian
My father
carpets
taught us that.
patterns, yeah, so the
When
patterns are
counting
never perfect.
how many knots and certain material, like I was mentioning that I have a silk one, and it's like, it's different knots per, depending on the fabric
The
and which.
smaller and tighter the
Yes.
knots, the more expensive and,
I
Persian
learned that.
carpets,
He made me He made me count them. My sister will attest to that. But so talk about, the culture itself and the history and the civilization, because it is a incredibly bright, well-educated, incredible culture. But tell us a
Yeah, I
little
mean,
bit more
even
about it.
today, 97% of the women in Iran, they have a 97% literacy rate, which is higher than even we have here in the United States. The culture is thousands of years old. It's one of the oldest continuously inhabited civilization. So you do have others that were like Sumerian and others, but they've changed language or changed. But so in terms of the actual culture, what you could still call Iranian culture has existed in some form or another for like 3,000 years. And forgive me if I have my math wrong. Cyrus the Great, which is kind of the initial Persian dynasty, I think, founder, he laid down some human rights, including like no slavery. And so a lot of people point to Cyrus as one of the first leaders to promote civil and human rights, which is phenomenal. The culture also gave us algebra. The word algorithm comes from the Iranian who founded this. Windmills. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, qanats, but they're underground water. And I've heard that the government now, which is horrible murders. They don't care about their people at all, but I understand that they have used those underground water tunnels for weapons storage, and it has cost the farmers their water that they use for agriculture, which is too bad because that is an ancient thing. They also developed refrigeration in a desert way back when. So they're very proud of their culture and their length and history. And so when you hear Iranians say that the United States won't break them, what they're really talking about is their spirit, but also that culturally they will remain intact.
Well, and I think it's hard because, and I really want to get into like more about your great grandfather and some more about your family and your history. But I think the hardest part of what our current environment is because you have a regime who comes in, and I grew up with this from the German Nazi standpoint. It doesn't mean the civilization and the culture and the country believes in it. And I
No.
think that's something that we are so blinded by. Not everyone, Germans weren't all Nazis, you know, and this is what I think is so challenging in our current environment is they're incredible people. Every country in the world is incredible people, but who rules it sometimes shifts your perception. And
Yes.
it's something that I think you've helped me and we're lucky here in Atlanta. There's incredible Persian restaurants that we go to together that are some of my favorite. And there's more and more showing. You and I talked years ago, there was one, and now they're coming more and more I'm seeing. And it's one of my we'll have to go again soon. But one to bring.
Schwarzman's It's very delicious.
Oh, I love it. And you're teaching me all different things, and it's just one of my favorites. But I do want to get because that is something that the history can't be forgotten. And I'd love you to bring up, and that's kind of where I want to hear more about your great grandfather. And you were mentioning and telling me a little bit about him. So tell me about him.
So he was known as the Merchant of Birzhand. And so Birzhand is a small town in the southern part of the country on the Silk Road. So he was trading. Actually, I should have brought some props to show you some of the things that I inherited from him. But he had a business called Malek and Sons, and he is referenced in a book that I have seen the pages in Farsi. I've had to have it translated for me. And he owned a little village outside of Birzhand called Noferest. And my dad his father also had a place there. And my dad says that this little village in the desert had the coldest, clearest water. The stream was beautiful. He said they had fruit trees. You would just reach down and bite the fruit. And he told all these sort of spiritual, mystical stories about my great great grandfather. And so when I named my company 25 years ago, I named it No Forest means new thought or new idea. So my company is New Thought Marketing, and it's harkening back to my merchant of Virjan great great grandfather. I'm
It's in
hoping
your
to write a
DNA.
short story about him, actually.
That's incredible. Well, and it's interesting, you and I have that in common, that some of my dad's ancestors were the first Jewish settlers in Key West.
Oh,
And
no way.
there's and so Ernest Hemingway referenced these, like, I think it was 6 to 10 Jewish families, and that was one of my great great grandfather, if I'm right. My cousin Leslie is our ancestry, documentarian. She'll correct me, but it's part of, and being in books and history, my aunt in Germany was in a very well-known book as well, and it's just incredible. I mean, to
Yeah, to
have
be able
that
to see
as
that.
you to
Can I
see it.
add something to the piece about the
Sure.
people?
Yeah.
So Iranian people are notorious gift givers. One of my good friends said that we're competitive gift givers. It's a part of their culture is to be hospitable in an extreme. And so if you compliment a Persian woman's scarf, she might take it off and give it to you and insist that you take it. Or you'll have a package on your doorstep the next day with a scarf. This ring that I'm wearing today is turquoise and gold. And my aunt, Zore, she took it off of her hand, pressed it into my palm, and she said, "This is a gift. It is not from the store, it is from my heart." So that is the ring. And
Oh,
then this bracelet, the agate one, is from one of my cousins. And I'm wearing my name in Farsi or Persian
beautiful.
that we got on an Etsy shop, actually. So the hospitality is legendary. The people are so kind. There have been Americans who've traveled there, even in these dark past 40 years, who come back and say the same thing. They're welcomed into strangers' homes. The people are lovely. The government is not. And their government is not taking care of their people. And that's part of why things have gotten so out of hand over there.
Well, and let's talk about the history because, you and I grew up with this. I mean, I remember this has been going on since we were children, and before and why did it get so complicated between the US and Iran? Tell me more
Well, it
because
goes
it
back
is.
a lot further than the hostage crisis, right? I think a lot of people think of what happened in the 70s and the revolution. It actually goes back way before that. In 1908, oil was discovered in Iran, and a British businessman had purchased the rights to it. And so, what would become the British Petroleum BP company was mining the oil in Iran and keeping most of the profits. And they elected a prime minister, a democratically elected prime minister. His name was Mossadegh. And Mossadegh was like, "Hey, now we should be able to keep some of that money." And he wanted to nationalize the oil. So Britain was like, "Oh, we can't have that." So they actually went and chatted up their CIA counterparts, and they instituted and implemented a coup in Iran. It was called Operation Ajax. So Iranians have long felt like America has maybe even more power than we do, but I always joke they're conspiracy theorists, but it's rooted in some truth, and it's because we did overturn their government. We installed the Shah Pahlavi, and he was Western friendly, let us have oil for good prices, or let us continue to mine and keep most of the profit. And the Iranians resented that. And at some point, they started rising up against the Shah. Now, the Shah did some very good things in terms of modernizing a country that wasn't very modern at the time. When I lived there, you all, nobody wore headscarves except the old Christian, more Muslim women. But, and, they wore short skirts because this is a
I re- and they'd show those photos now. if anyone's, in social media, they're like, before this date, like this is what they look like, and they're in beautiful bikinis, and they're all like,
Yes.
these images that show up, because that's what I remember. Like, and that was probably, I was born in the 70s, and I remember some of those photos as I was a little child being like, oh, this is what
Yeah.
these beautiful women and men represent. And it's that was so.
But on the other side of that, he was pressing reforms such like I believe he made it so it was illegal to wear the hijab,
Yeah.
and religious women wanted to be able to continue to do that. He had a very the Savak, the secret police, that if you had any dissent, you got killed or taken away. So, while he did do some good things and there were Iranian feminists and there was a lot of good stuff happening, he did some very bad things too. So the Iranians were starting to against a lot of this, and Ayatollah Khomeini, who was in France in exile. Interesting. I just saw a clip today. He was considered this saint, the spiritual like saint that he was going to democratize the government. That was not at all what he did. He came in and he implemented hardline Islamic rule. And the Iranian feminists knew this. They actually were writing about it, but nobody was listening. And then you have the revolution and the installation of a very hardline Islamic government.
Yeah. Well, and it's why, so America to me, very often, especially in this, we get involved. We want to help, I mean,
Where do we
and
want
I'm,
to help though?
well, so that's the fine line. And that's what I think you and I have such very similar beliefs. And it's, where's the fine line of where we get involved and what is for our best interest versus helping out,
I mean, I think
people and
generally
communities.
most countries only intervene when it is in their own best interest. And certainly 1953, that was because we wanted to help our ally and probably wanted a better price on oil ourselves. And in 1978, when the revolution happened, I think we didn't get involved because we thought maybe we'd have more favorable terms with the Ayatollah, because at the time the Shah was starting to make some noises around nationalizing oil again. So, there it always comes back to oil, seems.
It really does. It really
Yeah.
does. Land control and oil, like owning more
I
land, and then it's just,
Yeah, so there have been a lot of protests, and in January and February there were just tens of thousands of people taking to the streets in Iran. And the reason they were doing that is because the economy is just tanked. The inflation is out of hand because of the sanctions that are imposed on the country, but also because of mismanagement by their government. They have given 50% of the economy to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, which is horrible. It's not the police, it's a whole other thing. It's not the army. And so they are so enmeshed, they're never going to overthrow the mullahs, right? Because they're economically enmeshed. And so they've had 40 some years to develop this system where it all kind of feeds into each other. And so the people were taken to the streets, and the president of the United States, Trump, was saying, go, 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 we'll support you. I was talking to a relative of mine earlier, and he said so they believed him, and he didn't. He didn't come in January and February. Maybe that would have made a difference. I personally don't think you can overthrow a regime with bombs, and I don't know if it would have made much of a difference. But at any rate, the people thought we would help, so they took to the streets. To your point about us helping or not helping, and then it didn't. We didn't. So now I don't know
yeah.
if it's too little, too late.
Well, and it's one of those that, from your perspective, and you and I talk, we've talked before. One of the podcasts we did was about, politics. From your perspective, what I think makes this so difficult is, no offense, there was no plan. Like, in my humble opinion, I just don't, you know, it seems that it's like, oh, we're going to do this, but it's Congress didn't approve. And it's all, and you keep hearing this over and over again. But if you think it through from a strategic standpoint of how we really could have helped, yes, there's always monetary benefits and oil and whatever we were going to try to do. How, with Congress getting involved, do you think this could have gone smoother? Like this just,
I don't, let me ask you this. Why would we ever be involved in regime change? And if we were going to be in the business of regime change, which is not one of our stated goals, why Iran? Why not Cuba or North Korea that actually does have?
but we're going after Cuba. We've gone after Venezuela. Like now it's like, so we're going to go after everyone. And
Right.
as we've seen with Iraq, we don't
And
help
how do you,
very.
and then, we spent 20 years in Afghanistan and we replaced the Taliban with the Taliban. So,
it's true.
and the terrain in Afghanistan that makes it so unfavorable for a ground invasion is even worse in Iran. It's completely surrounded pretty much by mountains, and it's much larger. Iran is an enormous country.
How
So
big is it compared do you know what, like, how many states of ours compared to? I forget the size, but it's really
I've
big.
seen it. It's like 5. It's,
Yeah, that's what I was gonna
yeah,
say,
it's
that
really, really large, and, of
yeah.
course, because of the Mercator projection on the globe, it is closer to the equator, so it looks smaller than it is, but if you look at some other maps, you'll see it's
Yeah,
enormous. Africa is enormous. If you saw the,
yeah.
images from the Artemis 2 that they sent back,
Yeah. I
look at the
know.
continent of Africa is enormous. Iran is also quite large, and so it's not a feasible thing to go in with boots on the ground. Can you have regime change with just bombing? I don't think so. There's no reason for them to leave. I will say this, the Ayatollah that we killed, Khomeini, not Khomeini, Khomeini, he was 86 and had cancer and was very, very
He's
sick.
going to die.
He was going to die. And I don't know. I don't know if when he died, if the Iranian people, because of all the protests, if the council that decides who gets to be the next Ayatollah, if they would have maybe picked somebody more moderate, I don't know. But instead they picked his son, who's even more of a
More
hardliner and in
radical.
his 50s, right?
And they killed his wife and kid, like,
Yeah.
he's pissed. Like, you
Yeah.
just destroyed his family,
Yeah.
and it just that is another reason why I really will stand by there wasn't a thought out plan,
Well,
obviously.
there have been plans for an Iranian invasion
Yes.
in case they use a
Of
nuclear bomb or
course.
whatever. There've been plans, but there's a reason why other presidents didn't implement any of them, and that was
Yeah.
because the intelligence said that Iran would probably close the Strait of Hormuz, which is
Which is
pronounced
logical.
right. It's pronounced
I'm not I knew
well.
that
It's
was coming.
it's illegal. I want to be clear. It's against international law. They shouldn't do that. But it is. But it was foretold. I
Yeah.
believe I saw some reporting in the New York Times that Prime Minister Netanyahu told Trump that wouldn't happen, and also told him that this would all be over in like 2 days, and the Iranian people would
Yeah.
would rise up. And I think Trump believed him over his own advisors, who told him that that
Yeah,
was
which
not
told him
likely.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly.
So this
How
is
are
not
they
this was not unforetold or unforeseen. There were plans that suspected it. Trump knew, he was told, so we can't just blame it on
valid?
ignorance. He was told, and he's gotten away with so much in his life and in his history as a president that I think he perhaps just thinks normal rules don't
Well,
apply.
no, against anything in life. It is
Yes.
also, every day what kills me is today's tax day.
Mm.
Every day our money is going to certain things,
Yeah.
and you look at it and going $1 billion a day, and you just our infrastructure is breaking internally at our
Could have
country.
already Our senator has Senator Ossoff has pointed out we could have paid for universal pre-K already. Like,
Yeah,
so many things we could have
and
done
we
with that
keep
money.
in our, deficit and everything else. But it's also heartbreaking, as you said. People are living there every day. The fear, and we've seen wars, we've seen this. It's horrific, horrific circumstances. And I know you have family that's still there. How is it for your family? What's the current environment that you're seeing? And I know every day changes and there's so much. It's so heartbreaking, but how are they doing?
So it's hard to know. Some of them I haven't heard from because I mostly DM'd like on Instagram, and there's no internet now. Although the children are going to school at home on an internet that's been provided by China and Russia. I don't know if breaking news.
Breaking news.
China and Russia have provided, I guess, almost like an intranet that is geofenced for only within Iran. So they have no way of getting other perspectives. They're only getting state news. They have no access to the internet. So nobody's able to DM or send videos or anything, unlike the Green Revolution, which happened and they were sending out their videos on Twitter. Iran has gotten very sophisticated about shutting it all down. They also don't have satellite links. And people are like, why doesn't Elon Musk let them? Well, because if they put a satellite dish out and there's a signal that goes up, my cousin told me this just today, that it'll be seen, it'll be known, and then the Revolutionary Guard will come and kill you. Like, this is not a risk you want to take. So no satellite, there's no way for them to get outside news. In terms of their day-to-day life, I have confirmed that at the moment their food supply is not disrupted. The supply chain is still working.
How is that? Can I ask? Because that is something, I cover supply chain and the tech side.
Yeah.
How is it still? How's the supply chain still not broken? How they
They
had
have
enough.
a year, I'm told they have about a
Wow.
year in reserves and they are using those reserves. So, and then oil, same, the prices haven't gone up, but the prices of everything are horrible. And that's part of why they were protesting. The inflation has gone up so much more that even though the government did increase some salaries, it was nowhere near enough to make up the gap. Hence the protests. That's part of the reason. So they don't have cell service to be able to call here. I have family that has a landline and occasionally he can get a call to me, but it's extremely expensive. So my family, a lot of the families that you'll hear of from those of us in the diaspora have are wealthier families. But the wealth gap when I lived in Iran was enormous. I lived on a street, Elaine, where there was this beautiful mansion that I remember. I was young, but I remember it had like a marble driveway and had a fence that a gate and had bronze lions on the top. Literally across the street was a family living in a cardboard shack. Same exact street, right across the street. And we had an open sewage system. It's called the Jube, stinky. But the poor people washed their clothes and washed their dishes, and they peed in that sewage system. It was designed, my dad told me, so that it would go downhill, so all the sediments would drop to the bottom. So it was hygienic adjacent, right? But that was how the poor people lived. And there was no middle class in Iran. The only middle class were the Americans, and there was quite a lot of us there. I went to an American school. That was the middle class. Now I think it's not as drastic, but when we talk about in the United States a wealth gap and how it's growing, I get PTSD because of what happened in Iran. Because when you are desperate and you are poor and you're uneducated, you're easily propagandized by religion, which is what happened in Iran.
Which is and us and a
Now they're not so they're poor, but they're not so uneducated. They're quite educated in
well,
Iran.
and one of the things that really disturbed me and you and I were texting about was I was so heartbroken. First of all, the girls' school. I can't even talk about it too much of like
But
civilians.
can I just be clear? That girls' school is next to a military target. So the Iranian government did that on purpose.
100.
At the same time, I can't think about that without getting choked up. And my cousin told me that they don't have bomb shelters. They can go to a subway, but the subway isn't very deep, so it's not that safe. And he doesn't live near one. But when the bombs are dropping, his house is rattling and shaking, and there's no early warning system. So they've had 40 some years to plan how they were going to defend themselves against an attack from the great Satan from the United States, but they have done nothing to protect their people. So I want to be clear when I talk about it, because I kind of think we all suck at the moment, not the people's fault, because they have tried to vote their way out of this. I don't know how many of your viewers know this. You cannot run for president or leg any of the legislative or executive branch positions without being approved as a candidate by so they only approve candidates that will enact the stuff that they want. And
How can
everything
that
is
change?
overseen by the supreme leader.
So
So they can't vote their way out of it.
how can that change?
I no
And in
idea.
the end, we can't make that. There's only so
No.
much.
I mean,
I
I
mean,
think you
that's
can, international pressure, we've certainly seen some of that. We've been trying to do
yes.
that. The Iranian government, not the people, the Iranian
Yeah.
government feels like they're surrounded by nuclear weapons. Why can't they have one to protect themselves? I disagree with this. And just to be clear, I don't agree with the Iranian government really on anything. Uh, so I don't know how you overthrow an authoritarian regime. I'm not an expert in that.
Yeah, of course.
The only thing I suspect is super duper outside pressure that makes it a priority. But I think everybody gets so confused with the politics of the situation
Yeah.
in what we call the Middle East, which is, by the way, a colonial term. Middle to whom? And
Yeah,
Iran's
them.
on the continent of Asia, Southwest Asia.
Yeah, which
So
is
you'll
like
hear a lot of people refer to it as the region as SWANA, Southwest Asia, North Africa, because that is more geographically
really,
correct.
yeah,
Even though you don't necessarily think of Iranians having that much in common when you think of the broad term of Asia, but
yeah.
that's where we are located. So yeah, so I don't know the answer, Elaine. I'm not an expert in that, but I know that this is not working.
Yeah,
And you're
it's
going to
not
have a
work.
humanitarian crisis, not just in Iran, but because of the Strait of Hormuz being closed, all of those tankers and things that the last ones are just now coming, right? So there's going to be a gap starting to happen soon. And I don't think it's going to be like overnight, everything's going to go up, but I
Yeah.
think we're going to have some
Yeah,
problems.
and this is what we talked about before is the supply chain challenges of,
Yes.
it's just the impact across the world. And what's hard, what's hard for me is that we did this alone. We didn't have allies helping us, obviously Israel, but that being said, it's
This is gonna be
really
over in 2 days, Elaine. Why would
it's
we need
few
any help?
days. It's just we're done. We've already won.
And
It's
then
like,
the
ugh,
people are gonna rise up. I honestly don't know why Trump didn't just take that as his off-ramp to say, "We did our part. It's up to you people to rise up now." Like, I don't know why he didn't
I
just
kind
take
of
that as
thought
his
that's
off-ramp.
I thought that's what was going to happen. I thought, and when is the off ramp? Like, when
Well,
is
so
it?
apparently Saudi Arabia has been telling me that they want him to stay there. Like, they want Iran destroyed. It seems like Israel wants Iran
Of
destroyed.
course.
Whatever that means. Yeah, I don't there's no
It's
there is no consistent way of looking at this without there being hypocrisy all around.
I know. Well, and it's hard. What's so hard, and I've been spent some time in Israel, and that's my experience with the region. And I can't wait to travel more. But the culture and the buildings and the everything. What's so heartbreaking is, as you said, it's such an old civilization.
Beautiful.
And in a snap of a bomb, all that you're losing all these buildings, and it's just the culture and the history. And
Yeah,
I
it's
find that.
hard. I see the Golistan palaces is
I
just
know.
gorgeous, and thank
Yeah.
God it's not completely destroyed, but it's been hit hard. Iran has, I forget how many UNESCO World Heritage Sites, but it's a ton. I was young, but I remember the beauty and I was just awe-inspired by inlaid gold and inlaid turquoise inside mosques. I didn't even know what I was looking at, but yet I've never forgotten it because it was
Yeah, they're
so
impressive.
impressive. You know how
Well,
if you've ever been to the Sagrada
yes.
Familia, everybody talks
Oh my
about
God,
that. Have
it's
you been
yes.
there?
Yes, I
Yeah.
have.
Everybody goes to the Sagrada Familia and they're like, "My God, what an experience." And I'm like, "Yeah, wait till you go into a mosque and it is a quite an amazing
So
experience. I've been
true.
there." But it's hard to describe unless you've had an opportunity to,
Yeah.
step foot in and be awed by the mirrors and the reflections it's just insane. That's the architecture and that's the algebra that we
Yeah.
talked about earlier.
How do you think Americans misunderstand how Iranians feel and like about their government,
So I
about the
think you have a
US?
lot of people in the diaspora who believe that we can actually overturn this government and get something like maybe the Shah's son back in there. But the people who are in the diaspora are not representative of all of Iranians at all, right? They're the wealthy ones, the well educated, the well connected. It was very difficult and expensive to come here. And then the people in Iran, the ones that you saw rising up and protesting, they certainly want a government that's more fair. And there's no polling for me to know what percentage of that is. I can tell you that my family has told me that, 70% of the people want a different government. But since we started bombing, like always happens, that number's gone down, right? It's not that they don't want a different government, but they don't want us bombing and they don't believe this is the way, or they believe we did it too late.
Yeah.
Now, there are still some who have hope, including in my own family. I have cousins in my own family, some here in the States, some over there, who believe that this is going to bring a change. But this is something I want folks to understand. Can you imagine being so desperate that you would even welcome another country bombing your town to try to get rid? That's how enmeshed the government is. But there are 30% over there who are very religious, who are very supportive of that. You see them on the streets. Now, a lot of the folks you see on the streets who are supporting the government, they're told to go out. Or according to some of the conspiracy theorists in my own family, they're paid. So I don't know the answer. But in my own family, we don't agree on this. I don't believe there's widespread agreement. I think that's something that is surprising to a lot of people because I think when other countries are bombed, for the most part, people are like rallying around the flag. Here you have some who are, some who aren't,
Yeah.
some who were, some who are changing their mind. It's definitely not a monoculture at all.
Yeah. Well, and it's frightening because, as you said, when you speak up, I think that that is, and what frightens me is, you and I have talked about, and you and I've had a lot of conversations about, like, my mom's been gone now 6 years, and she always said rhetoric. She grew
Mhm.
up with Nazis. She grew up with this. There's certain that you hear in the political government. And right now, what worries me is you know, we're so divided. And there's so many things that I think this war has brought. We always want to help people, and I really understand that and respect it, but at what cost? And that's what I think is such a hard, it's like where do we get involved? Where should we get involved? And I think that
Well,
that is just the
I
never ending
maintain that
question.
Iran did not represent any sort of imminent threat. The agreement that Obama had negotiated that Trump got us out of was actually working. Not great, but it was keeping their weapons at bay, sorta.
It wasn't an imminent threat. It just
No, there's
wasn't.
no imminent
And I
threats.
just would fall to that I'm not saying that could they, and they're, and what the other piece we talked about was besides the school, the university, their university that's equivalent, if
To
not
MIT.
to MIT, destroyed. And you go, these are intelligent, smart people, and this is their school, and it's like heartbreaking that it's like, could you imagine if that happened to us with MIT or any of the schools or anywhere? And we
Yeah, and
just
engineers are so respected. My husband's a civil engineer, and he calls him mohandas, which means engineer. So, like you address somebody like doctor or whatever, they actually will address engineers, mohandas.
Yeah, it's incredible. How is your dad feeling right now? How is he coping with this? This has to be
My
so
dad
challenging.
has I feel like a lot of Iranians here feel like they're in exile. They'll never see their home again. He's in his 80s. He left after the revolution. We actually came back before he did. So he was there in the very beginning of it. There were curfews that were not enforced. People broke into his home and stole some of our Persian rugs that had been in our family for generations. He's an American citizen. He's definitely does not support this action at all. Um, I think he's long ago come to terms with the fact that he would never see Iran again. And I don't know that I ever came to terms with that. I think I was always hopeful that not that the government would be overturned, but that it would be calm enough that I could go and visit and not worry that I'd be arrested. One time I had two passports because I was a dual citizen. That's not allowed anymore. So I don't even know. I know I have relatives who've been able to travel back and forth, some who have green cards and some who are American citizens. But it's not something I ever pursued. And now I know I'll never be able to take my son there, and that makes me sad.
Well, it's interesting. There's a lot of topics that give me like heartburn to some degree of like, oh, you can't have dual citizenship. And
Mm.
that's something our government is throwing out there, going, you
Yeah.
can't, you must.
Yeah.
And you go, all these things, there's parallel to me of what we're trying to change our fundamental belief as a country. And I think we're at a tipping point, not to the severity, but you look and go, there is this rhetoric and there is this, we're the best and we're the ones. And I just struggle sometimes because I'm like, I remember my mom, we went to, when I grew up, it was East and West Berlin. We'd
Yeah.
fly into, and it was West Berlin was the center, and then East Berlin was around. And we'd fly into the airport, and my mom had dual citizenship. And she would disappear in the back. And I remember my father was worried having my sister and I, and she'd be like gone. They'd do interviews. And it was like we were always worried she wouldn't come back, and she was a German citizen, but that's the and my mom gave up German citizenship because she was like, if I'm going to go to Germany, and then of course we had the
She wanted the
reunification of the United.
protections.
She wanted the protection. And I just think of what a hard decision she had to make, but it was for us as a family and to protect herself. And it's like, these are things that are so traumatic to give up who you were.
Can
She
you
was
imagine moving
born,
now and moving to another country and switching citizenships and learning a new language and all of the things that these people have done?
assimilating, and yeah,
And you see that with immigrants now, that people don't come here for funsies. They come here because they're desperate.
and
A lot of them.
want a better life.
Yeah.
Well, and how do you see, like, what worries you most? What gives you hope? Like, what can we do? I mean, you and I always try to problem solve, and it's like, God, with politics, like, that's a whole nother conversation of how can we make a difference? But
I
what
don't know that
worries
there's much
you?
that we can do for Iran. I'm going to be honest, other than elect politicians who will stand up to Trump and say, hey, you need a war resolution, you need this, you need that, and actually prosecute this more in the open. That being said, no great resistance movement or change has ever happened without people putting their bodies on the line. and we're too comfortable here. We don't do that. And I'm not suggesting your viewers do that, but I think if you study, there's a great professor I follow, Tad Stormer, online. He's
Mhm.
writing a book on the resistance history of the United States. But when he goes back and looks at those movements, there was a singular focus. So when we go out to a No Kings rally or something, what are we asking for? I don't ever know what's our ask. We don't have a
We don't
singular
have an ask.
ask.
There's no
We
call to
don't have
action as we have in PR and marketing. What's the call to action?
Yeah, there's no call to
There's
action.
none.
The civil rights movement had a very clear set of goals and objectives when they did the bus protest. They knew that was going to cost some of the people who are participating, so they set up food trains and other ways for folks to get to work. They had a whole plan, and they had a very specific ask. I don't see that right now. Everybody is reacting to whatever the news of the day is, and there's a ton to react to,
And it's
but
also
there's no
slanted. What you and I both know, our feeds give us our feeds.
yes.
I'm in my own bubble and I really try to go out of the bubble because I want to see reality
Yeah.
versus, right now, and you've heard this too, that we're not even seeing real images of Iran. We're being kept for
Right,
some,
and I've
not
been
all
asking
of
about
them.
that, yeah,
They're not
because,
all the
I
same,
know
like
they
when,
aren't getting
and that's what
anything,
I
so when
keep,
I talk to
I'm
them, I
so
tell them
thankful
what
for
I'm seeing.
reporters
I say, "Listen,
that are
this is what
doing
I'm
their
seeing
job and
reported here
really
in the
trying to
United
help.
States." You just froze, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, you were frozen, say that again?
I know you were frozen. Keep going. Sorry.
Oh, I was saying that when I talk to my cousin, I try to tell him what I'm hearing from the United States because I know he's getting no outside information. We have more access, but then we have a lot of, like, I've seen people posting videos of things that happened in Iran years ago, and you don't know that. So I think it's hard to know what to believe. You follow sources like Al Jazeera English. They actually have sources on the ground there. That's a good place. BBC is another good one. But you have to be pretty cautious about what you're ingesting. As it relates to, like, here in the United States, you asked me what my hopes were for Iran, what my fears, what can we do? I'm not sure, like I said, beyond electing people who have more sense. What my hopes are, I think every Iranian, like, I mean, most of us are glad to see Khamenei gone. We didn't like him. We would like to see the whole government overturned. So my hopes are that somehow we'll slip and fall our way into that. It could happen.
Well, and look at the Hungary election. I was like, there's a glimmer of hope.
But again, they don't have a free election in Iran. They pretend like they do, but you can only vote for their approved candidate. So it's
Maybe we
not a free
send
election.
JD Vance over and have him select a party. It'll go the other way. Like, just a
Exactly,
joke, but
right?
I'm also like, oh, thank God. Like, go
Just
and
just
campaign for them.
hide your couches.
I your captain. Just it is,
Yeah,
and I
so I
think
think that Hungary gives us some hope, right? But it's not a template for Iran.
no, it's not a template. And every country,
Overturning what happened in Germany might be a better template. I'm not sure. Russia, although Russia never really overcame,
no.
right? So I don't really know.
Well, we're
But what
still
gives
with
me hope is that we'll slip and fall into some freedom.
and that's the hard part is that you want everyone to live in freedom to
Well, they are
elect.
definitely there. Iranians will go out into the streets, the women will have their hair covered. Although that they did win the right to not have to do that anymore, by the way. So they can go out without their hair covered. But then the minute they walk inside their homes or their parties inside their homes, they're dressed top to toes in couture. They're one of the largest purchasers of French couture clothing. They wear too much makeup, in my opinion, but they're
Yep.
like made up, like it's a whole, like they have an inside life and an outside life. And they're very good at compartmentalizing. And I remind myself of that here when things get so crazy. We're fed so much more news. Let me just be clear. The United States has always meddled. We've always had a lot of the problems that we see so virulently today. The divide that you're talking about, we've had that before. We've been terrible before. We
Yeah.
just weren't bombarded with it all the time. So I try to tell myself that if my Iranian family can live in relative peace and have some joy in their life, I think the history of Black Americans is also instructive for that, right? Protect your joy, protect your peace. Then I should be able to do that too. I should fight for what I believe is right, but also I should be able to compartmentalize and still have a life.
And one of the biggest things you and I will talk about, another her stories, is really free and fair elections. That is by far one of the things we have to protect in America. because elections aren't being stolen. There's not, all this. And it's that rhetoric is making it, people doubt the system. And our
Yes.
system is still working, even though I definitely have my own conspiracies. But in the end, we can never bridge the gap between these countries who lost their right to vote. It's the most critical piece.
I mean, we've
Once you,
always had to fight for this, right? Again, I want to use some history here. There were poll taxes. They're trying to bring them back and they call them other things, but this is a forever fight. And I think those of us who are Gen X, we were kind of raised to believe in this sort of American exceptionalism. I certainly believe this is one of the greatest countries. A lot of great things about America, but um, in such a way that I think we were blind to our fault lines. A lot of what we relied on were norms. It wasn't codified in any laws. So I do hope we're able to elect a Democratic president and Congress and that we're able to codify some of those norms because just for example, Trump's personal enrichment in the office and corruption it is illegal, emoluments clause, but it's not being enforced. And some of
nothing's
it was
being
just
enforced, nothing.
but just some of it was just norms, right? You don't do these things. And so I think we need to codify some of that.
And
And
have a little bit of ethics and morality,
I wanted to also just mention you said about freedom, right? People want to be free. Iranians right now, the ones that wish to overturn the government or would like another government, they want to be free from the tyranny of their government. They also want to be free from the tyranny of bombs being dropped on them. And I don't know how you can accomplish both those objectives. Well, personally, I don't think the bombs are going to help, but they want to be free from. They're kind of caught between literally a rock and a hard place. And I get frustrated because I don't have easy answers. I know when you and I've talked before about American politics, because I work on a lot of political campaigns, I have seen progress slow, but I've seen it and I've been part of it. So I have some more confidence. I don't have that here. I have nothing but sadness, fear, a lot of tears, and worry. Yeah, which is congenital. Persians are really good warriors, so that's we worry about everything.
well,
I have actual worry beads in my purse.
and it's also, I know the trauma my mom had growing up in Berlin during World War II.
I
Her
can
whole
imagine.
life hearing thunder, she thought bombs. So the trauma that, this is not a quick fix. Anyone that's living through this right now is going to have trauma. They just are. And that's what's so heartbreaking that it's like, I know my mom had her whole life. It was she didn't forget. To the day she died, she didn't forget. And I
I'm
find
sure
that heartbreaking that
it's
it's the
PTSD. I mean,
it is at the especially and she was a little girl and it's like, but well, she was born 2 days after Pearl Harbor, so she was literally in the middle of it. What do you want people to remember? And you've said some beautiful things about this culture and this country. And what do you want people to remember? Because they're real people and they're fabulous and smart and incredible culture. What do you want? Like, I know I highlighted it,
I
but
think I really want. I mean, beyond the food's fabulous. The kindness and the depth of the Iranian soul. It is common in Iran to memorize Persian poetry from Hafez or Rumi. My dad, who has a master's in math and an undergraduate degree in electrical engineering, has over 100 poems memorized. This is how he puts himself to sleep at night. He recites the poetry in his mind. This is a common practice. They're so poetic, it's part of their language. If you were to cook for me, and please do, by the way, if you were to cook for me, I would I would take your hand and I would say, Dasta shoma dard nakonid. May your hands never hurt. That would be my way of thanking you for the labor of cooking for me. If we were sitting in a room and I had to turn my back to you for any reason, I would apologize. And then you would say to me, a rose has neither front nor back. This is this is how they speak every day. This is not only for, the way you talk to your
could you
elders. This is how
imagine if we
they
were
speak.
that kind and thought,
I
I
can't.
just, and I know that's just, but I would love to live like that.
So I would
Just,
love for people to understand that that is who they are, deeply, deeply
yeah.
kind, poetic, and generous. And they just, they want to be free. My son actually has written a song about it called Azadi, which means freedom. And he has a line in there. He says, the last thing my cousin said to me is kiss your son and let Iran be free, which is an actual DM I got. So yeah.
Well, and I think something you said to me, we want people to think of Iran outside of politics. And I think it's important to remember these are people
Sure.
foremost. And I think that that's hard during war. And we make it really political of like, gas going up and this going up, but you have a whole civilization and a whole culture and country that's, you know, just being
Been
bombed.
around forever. And I mean, and I think this is true wherever bombs are flying right now, right? I always think about the people that are trapped. And in the case in Iran, trapped by their government. But now, because we have bombed bridges and things, I'm told that because I asked if they could leave if things got really bad. He said, well, there's no planes. I said, what about the trains? He said, well, they bombed so many of the bridges, you can't even take the trains. So the only way out would be to drive. And with really super elderly relatives who can't go that way, there's they're stuck. And that's just my family. There are many families with similar stories, not just in Iran, but in Palestine, in Lebanon right now, like in Israel, wherever bombs are flying. And I know we make this about a conflict with Israel all the time. It's not with the Israeli people, it's not with the Jewish people. Iran welcomed lots of Jews during World War II. There still are Jews in Iran. So it's not with the people, it's with the governments and the insanity around whatever. Um,
And trying to get more money. Yeah, and money is
Some of it is that, but some of it is a religious conflict. Iran
yeah,
should
100%.
has no business funding these terrorist groups. That's stupid. But again, that's the regime. That's not the people. The people don't support or want that. They're not trying to, you know, they think that they're the only ones standing up for Islam in the region because Saudis aren't, none of, so they feel like they have to, and that's ridiculous. So a lot of the problems that Iranians are facing are created by their government, and then some of them are created by other geopolitical forces and greedy desires.
And I think you said something earlier that, and kind of in closing is to me, it's so important who we elect because if you have government and supporting what they view on the global economy, the global world, global people, the world, it's so important. You have to vote for people that are, not going to make haste at this is a hard, you don't want casualties. You don't want, I don't know. It's
Well,
a hard
I
struggle.
think we too often though outsource our stuff to whoever we elect. We think, okay, we elected that good person, but that's not where it ends. That's just where it starts. So we have to collectively put the pressure on our elected leaders. There's no reason why a war powers resolution hasn't been enacted other than Mike Johnson's not going to do it. But, I've said this before when the Democrats go on social media and say, oh, this is wrong. You know what? They've got his cell phone number and they know where he lives and they could
Make
take a
a
camera crew.
difference, for
Well,
God's sakes.
but I don't want to put the pressure only on the Democrats
No.
because they're not the ones who are pushing this right now, right? So, but I'm just saying, like, we have to be more, our expectations need to be higher of our elected leaders, and
And
we
they
need
need
to
to
hold
do
them
what
to
we
account.
they're for us. They work for us. They get paid for us. They're on a
And the
team.
Iranian war is very unpopular. Like something like 70% of Americans that have been polled say, no,
Still
we should not be doing
want it.
this.
But and
Right.
then we have no voice to make a change, and we're going to keep spending $1 billion with no exit. And it's just we're going to be so. I mean, and just these constant threats. It's whiplash of like, okay, and you and I talked, we were going to talk the end of last week or beginning this week, and we're like, oh, what's happening today? We're like trying to catch up on the news of like, are we involved in shutting down the street where we shouldn't get involved? And it's like, oh no. And it's like every
And the next deadline is Tuesday. So I don't know when this is going to post, but my family there is bracing themselves for what's going to happen. The rumor is that they're hearing is that we are having some backdoor talks that are maybe not being publicized, but who knows? And that Trump wants to have the talks not in Pakistan anymore, but in Europe. Again, who knows?
yeah.
And I don't know who's having those talks. I don't
And
know.
then the flip side is then some of the government saying, oh, we've never talked to the US. That's lies. So it's like right
Who
now I
knows?
don't believe anything. So I'm kind of in this
It's
like, is
crazy
it
when you can't
really?
believe your own
Can't.
government. But
And
I
I know
think,
a
well,
lot of
that's how they feel.
I was just gonna say that's how they feel. And it's just to be in this, my heart goes out to this incredible country. I'm so glad. I always say that you're in my universe. I'm smarter because of you. I learn from you. I've tasted more different. We always go back to food. I can't help it because I'm like, but it is the beauty of this culture. And I just, I think we have to respect, all these countries. And it is what I said. This is not a political, like, these are people. And I know there's so much around it, but just remember there's humans that every day is affected. And now, as you said, they're worried for what the next deadline is and what that impact will be and how are they going to be harmed and how
And
are they not going to get water and food and it's mind
and
blowing.
their food, as you said, is actually a great metaphor for the country because Persian food is very subtly spiced. It's nuanced, it's layered. It takes a long time to prepare. It doesn't punch you in the face like some spicy foods from other
Mhm.
regions. And I think that the politics and the people, it's a very nuanced situation. So I think it's a great metaphor actually when you talk about the food.
But it's true. And my kids always, my kids are like, oh, you like salt and pepper, you like spices. They tease me. And I'm like, no, but I love Persian food. I think it is because it's flavorful and I can make it as like it's seasoned. It's just we have to do like a whole cooking show. And you're an incredible cook. I need to come over to your house for you to cook for me. But
As friends, we have a tradition where we all go out to eat for each other's uh, birthdays. And one year, a few years ago, I said, "So where do you want us to take you, Lauren?" And she pulls up a picture I had posted on Instagram of a Persian dish I'd made. She goes, "I want you to make this for me." And I was like, "Can't I just take you to a Persian restaurant? That's a lot of work."
it's a lot of
But
work.
I made it for her.
You're so sweet. I love always when everyone's birthdays. But I really do appreciate, I know you're so knowledgeable about this and my heart goes out to your family and your father and really,
I wouldn't say I'm so knowledgeable. I'm trying to learn more about the history of the region, but I think one thing that I would like more people to do is have conversations with those of us who've actually lived there. And that's a different kind of insight and perspective. You know, your mom lived in Germany, so it was in her soul and embodied in a different way. The thunder would terrify her. To this day, I'm scared of yellow Volkswagen bugs because when I lived in Iran, my neighbor was a friend of mine. His father was being picked up for work, and the car was too full. And so he said, "No, go on. I'll get another car." That car was stopped by a yellow Volkswagen bug, and they were murdered, all of them. And some crazy group of terrorists, I guess, in Iran at this time back then. And I was very young and impressionable and realized that my friend's father almost was killed. And so to this day, I have this visceral reaction to yellow Volkswagen bugs. And so, yeah, it's very different when you've lived somewhere. I don't mean to discount the Iranians who haven't lived there. I'm just saying I think it's really great that you're trying to reach out and hear stories from.
Well, and it's you and I, as I started the conversation with you, is we're so proud. We love our dads and we love, and our moms and like what gave us who we are. You and I are, I'm, half German. You're half, and that's to me is it makes it who we are. And I think that empathy and culture and
Did
knowledge.
you ever have people so, like, when I was first back in the States, the kids joked that they were gonna take me hostage, and they spray painted "terrorist" on my sister's
I was called a
lockers.
Nazi. I
Yeah,
was
I
called,
wondered.
yeah, I went to a Jewish camp and a Catholic high school. And so and then here in Atlanta, I never quite fit in many
Yeah,
areas. And I went to schools, as you know, and I wasn't Jewish enough. And I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? Like, and I get that, but I'm also, just because I'm not 100% something, I represent Germany, I represent America, I represent being Catholic and Jewish, and I'm just amalgamy of my generations and their ancestors and their ancestors.
sure.
But I was very traumatized as a kid coming home very young going, "What's a Nazi and why am I that?" And my mom, the
And you were
horror.
so much further removed from that than
Well,
Iranians were, right? Like, this was
Allen
happening. Yeah.
Allentown, Pennsylvania. Come on. Like I was so removed, but that was what the kids thought. My father wasn't allowed
But I
in.
mean, so removed in time, right? Because that
Yes,
was the 50s,
yes,
not the 70s, whereas what was
yes.
happening in Iran was happening at that time.
It was exactly
People still held those views and felt comfortable expressing them like that is insane to me. Insane.
insane. And then you look and go, yes, you're totally right. It was many years between, but then still people have those views. People are so myopic in their thinking that Jews did this and, the Germans did this. And however, it's just, two things can be true at once. A regime is not the people,
Right.
and I think that we lose that. because I struggle, and you and I, I struggle with what's going on in Israel, and Israel with Palestine, and going back and forth. And it's like, my heart goes out, but I can believe two things are true at the same time. And I
Sure.
think we forget that I'm so proud of my Jewish heritage. So proud. I love Israel. Incredible country. But there's a lot of things I don't support.
Hmm.
I'm still a Jew. I'm still like,
Yeah.
a half Jew, but
You're not monolithic,
I'm
and
not
I
monolithic. And I think that's what this conversation to me is, and there's so many other conversations with you that I want to be thought provoking, going, hey, we're more than this. And how can we make a difference? And not be afraid of other cultures and not try to get involved in all these. I want to help people, but I don't think we should get involved in a lot of all these other conflicts.
yeah, and
These,
I sometimes don't know, Elaine, like when people say, "Oh, you're Iranian," like, yeah, I'm also American, and I'm not gonna say I'm not either one of those. I'm both. And my family on my mom's side goes back to Jamestown or further. I haven't done all the research, but um, I think we were related to Daniel Boone in some aspects. Truly Appalachian, like West Virginia. I was born in Eastern Kentucky. And yet, on my dad's side, we go back, Merchant of Dijon, and very much a part of what you would consider Iranian history. And I'm never going to discount that or deny that. It is, and my son, who's never been there and probably never will go there, but he's very close to my dad. He's had the food. He likes the food. He knows enough about the culture. He's moved enough that he's writing a song about this situation.
and it's part of who he is. And that's my kids too, that, you know, I'm hearing them more trying to learn German, and they're learning more about the history. As they get older, they appreciate that, hey, that's who they were and that was their Omi. And
Mhm.
but then I was telling you that, my father's side also came from not from those regions. So I'm like 100%, 100% on both sides. But it's, my dad was a couple generations removed, but that's who they are. And I think embracing that and having your son be part of that, incredible. And the relationship, I always say, I wish my dad was around for my kids like your dad is for your son. What an incredible, because your father, they have a lot in common, and they're both so smart in the games and the things they talk about. And I've been loved being part of that, hearing that. I wish my father was alive for that, for my kids to teach them different things. Um,
Unfortunately, he didn't have my mother. She died a long time ago. But y'all, I
um,
gotta tell you something about LA. We went to an Italian restaurant and they had pork schnitzel on the menu, and because she's German, she ordered that instead of pasta. I
100,
have to tell you that.
100%. I'm like, wait a second, is there a schnitzel? Cannot. It's always a schnitzel. Schnitzel out. That's like number one rank. Like, what's my death meal? Might be that and a brownie. I
That's
can't.
hysterical.
Yeah,
Mine would definitely be Persian,
I don't.
probably the one of the stews I love so much that they don't have at a lot of the restaurants, but
But thank you. I really hope that people really have a chance to hear more, and this helped talk through some of the history and how incredible, this culture is. And if anyone has any questions, I will definitely put resource page for Shireen. Always a pleasure. I can't wait to talk. Next one,
thanks
we're
for
going to
the
talk
opportunity. Really, truly, I think, I want people to see more Iranians in our natural habitats, if you will,
natural habitat.
and also understand that it's a complicated issue. There's no black and white thing happening here, even among Iranians. They're at each other's, not at each other's throats, but they're definitely having some
Yeah.
spirited arguments,
And
and they argue loud.
I hope there's some resolve, and I hope there is at some point we'll see in our lifetime free and fair elections. I hope your son can go to the
Inshallah, as they
region.
say.
Yeah, I hope that that's, someday we'll talk and say, "Oh, he's gonna go visit," and that is so important to see,
So
We'll
I'm going to
see.
close by telling all of your viewers to Ruzit Shoma Khosh, which means hope you have a nice day, and Khodafis, which is goodbye.
Thank you, Shereen. Everyone, thank you so much for listening to this episode, and stay tuned. I'll have Shereen back. We're gonna talk politics in the
Okay,
US
ma'am.
coming up sometime soon. Thank you,
Sure.
everyone. Stay tuned for another episode coming soon.
Khodafis.